right. Then you where's your chair? No, we'll ask the address first. Shivangi will give the welcoming address, and then we'll ask the dean to take her time. Okay. Now let me ask my research assistant Shivangi to deliver the welcome address.
Good morning, everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you, especially our guests from Indonesia. Welcome to OP Jindal Global University. The topic for today's discussion is the role of Indonesia as big brother in ASEAN, past, present, and future. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Danny Mutada, our speaker for the event. Dr. Mutada is an assistant professor and head of the Department of Constitutional and Administrative Law, Semarang State University. He has obtained his PhD in political science from Northern Iowa University, USA, and has earned his master's degree in public administration from Flinders University, Australia. His academic interest includes theory of state, law and politics, and democratic governance. We also have with us Dr. Rudia, Dean of Faculty of Law, Semarang State University. Along with her, we have Dr. Ali Mashar, Deputy Dean of Faculty of Law, Semarang State University. I would like to thank the entire delegation from Indonesia for taking out time from their busy schedule and making an effort to be a part of this event. Today's event is very special for us because it marks the beginning of the ties JGU and Semarang State University will share in the future. I would now like to request Dr. Rodia to please address the gathering.
Okay, thank you so much. Good morning, on behalf of the Rector of State Semarang University, UNES. I am the Dean of Faculty of Law. Would like to say thank you very much to Jindal Global University for inviting us to visit and give the guest lecture today. And especially, I would like to thank Dr. Picken, who has kindly organized this event. Yes, Mr. Papau. UNES is one of the top 20 universities in Indonesia. And our vision is to become a conservation university with international reputation. We have research and excellent status from the government, and in our research, our goal UNES has so many international programs, so as international class, college field work, internship in some countries in Asia, guest lecture, visiting professor, international conference, credit transfer, and so on. And our vision are internationalization, good governance, and conservation mindset in education, research, and community service. Our journal are open for researchers, academia, students, and practitioners all around the world. Faculty of Law has many accredited law journals, include State Law Review, Pandekta, Let's Review Law Review, Journal of Private and Commercial Law, UNES Law Journal, Journal of Criminal Law Student, and Journal of Indonesian Legal Studies. We also have a legal clinic. There are clinics of anti-corruption, protection of women and children, environment, agrarian, intellectual rights, advocacy and human rights, labor, and legislative drafting. possibilities collaboration, we wish that the future collaboration between UNES and Jindal Global University will include the promotion of exchange of faculty members and our researchers from both university, facilitation of the acceptance of faculty members and researchers who are preparing for their doctoral dissertation, promotion of collaborative research and publication of research by faculty members and researchers, and promotion of the exchange of reference data, publication and academic information and literature, facilitation of the mutual exchange of administrative and secretarial personnel attached and the academic department and assorted administrative bodies of each university, and any other project that shall be mutually identified and agreed by both university at a later stage. And at the end of my speech, I personally hope that our agenda today will become a good start to make a good relation between two universities and open for any possibilities of future collaboration. And thank you very much. And I have a very productive day. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much, Professor Rodia. A few things for our students who are here. Indonesia, before I invite my friend, Professor Danny, Indonesia is the third largest democracy in the world in terms of population. Indonesia is also the largest Muslim population. And Indonesia is the biggest country in Southeast Asia. And of course, my friend Danny will talk about more. But if you look at the South China Sea, which is one of the most critical, important geopolitical issues in 21st century, you would see the role of Indonesia in different ways. So it's not an active claimant, but again, it has a lot of stakes in the South China Sea dispute. In fact, my book is coming up next year on the South China Sea dispute. These things would be clarified in that book. But again, so far, unfortunately or fortunately, there have not been any kind of formal or informal contacts between Indian universities and Indonesian universities much. So what we are hoping is, we would like to be the pioneer in this respect, where we can bring together Indian universities, especially Jindal University and Semarang State University, or even at some point expand this to other universities in Indonesia. Not only Indonesia, but universities in Southeast Asia. That's the reason why this morning our Vice Chancellor, Professor Raj Kumar, and our Registrar, Professor Murthy, had signed MOU with Semarang State University. So we are now officially partners, and I would like to invite our students who are interested in geopolitics or South China Sea, Southeast Asia, Asia Pacific, or let's say conflict studies or democratization, ethnic studies for that matter. So Indonesia is a very good case study. In fact, as a political scientist, what we have been talking about is there are scholars who argue that democracy and Islam cannot exist together. In fact, if you look at Indonesia, that is proven wrong. Definitely, democracy and Islam can coexist and can work together. And that's why Indonesia is very important in that respect for people who are interested in looking at this democratization process or democratic transition. So, all right, we'll have plenty of time. We'll open the floor after Professor Denny has given his speech. So please prepare your questions. And if any of our delegation, if you would like to say a few words, I would like to give a chance before I invite the main speaker. Anybody would like to say a few words? No? Okay. All right. Now, I would like to formally invite my dear friend, Professor Denny Muqtada, who is my classmate and coffee mate, to give a talk on the role of Indonesia as a big brother in ASEAN, past, present, and future. You have about, let's say, 20 minutes, 25 minutes. Is that okay?
Yep, that's fine. Well, thank you very much, Professor Kipken. I usually call him Papao because it's kind of a friendship tie between me and Dr. Kipken. So if I call him Dr. Kipken, it's a little bit something on my heart. It's not my habit, but that's fine because he's a director of the Center for Southeast Asian Studies at this university, right? Okay, good morning, everybody. I am really humbled, really delighted to be with you all here in this room. And this is an honor for me, Dr. Kipken, that I sit here to talk about Indonesia and ASEAN. Before giving this topic, actually, Dr. Kipken asked me to talk about the dispute between countries on South China Sea, but I said, you more expert than me, so let me talk about just about ASEAN, and we will see how ASEAN can play role in that kind of tensions. All right, so my topic for today's lecture is the role of Indonesia as a big brother in ASEAN. You know, big brother actually is the words of Dr. Kipken, indicating that Indonesia is kind of playing leadership role in ASEAN during the past time, present time, and the future time. And we will see the difference during my talk. So here, I would like to divide my discussion into three. Number one, I'll discuss very briefly about Indonesia, in case some of you have little knowledge about Indonesia. Second one, I will talk very briefly about ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations. And the last one, I will talk about the role of Indonesia in ASEAN. So, what do you know about Indonesia? How many of you have visited Indonesia? Of course, okay, one, and then only one. I don't expect Dr. Kip can raise the hand. All right. So, Indonesia is exactly located in the center of the intersection between Australian continent and Asia, and between Pacific Ocean and Indian Ocean. So I think it's very strategic position. If you look at the picture a little bit closer, you can see that there are so many islands in Indonesia, and among these islands, there are 5 biggest islands. Number one is Java, and Jakarta is located in Java. And our town, Semarang, is also located in Java. Semarang is the capital city of Central Java. And then the second one is Sumatra and Borneo at the center of the regions. And we share the region between 3 countries, Indonesia, Malaysia, and also Brunei Darussalam. And then the other island is Sulawesi. It mentioned in that picture Celebes, actually Sulawesi. And then Papua right in the east. So, as you can see here, we have around 17,000 islands. A new report from CIA, United States, they reveal that actually Indonesia has around 18,000 islands from the satellite image. But officially, our government mentioned that our island is around 17,508 during low tide. And of these 17,930 island is inhabited by 1,128 ethnic groups who speak 726 local languages and 1 official language. So in Indonesia, one Indonesian, at least they speak 2 languages. Sometimes one Indonesian speak 2 or more local languages, right? So this indicates that we are really multicultural society. The population in Indonesia is little bit, not little bit I think, is far below Indian. How many population in India? 1 point, how many? one point something billion. Right? So if you guys come to Indonesia and occupy our country will be defeated by you have a lot of population. And 85% of this 258 million is young people, youth, so it's below 55 years old. The GDP is around 915 billion, and the average growth is 5.2% per year, so it's not bad. About religion, we have 6 official religions. Islam is, of course, the majority. Dr. Kipken already mentioned this, 87%. Christian, Catholic, Buddhist, Hinduism, and Confucian. Outside these 6 official languages, there are so many other minority languages, religions. So here you can see that Dr. Kipken also already mentioned that we are the 3rd largest democracy with the biggest Muslim population. So when people say Islam and democracy does not fit each other, then we can see that in Indonesia, that thesis doesn't work. And we also the largest archipelagic country in the world, and of course the founding members of ASEAN. So, looking at our history. So long time before the 15th century, Indonesia consists of several kingdoms. We have Majapahit, the Hindus kingdom, Sriwijaya, Demak, many other small kingdoms. But after 1595, when the Dutch expedition came to Indonesia, step by step, little by little, the Dutch government conquered those kingdoms until finally, in 1900, all of the regions in Indonesia is just controlled by the Dutch government. Until 1942, when the Japanese government sent the troops to Indonesia and occupy the Dutch East Indies. So the Dutch East Indies is a name of a country before Indonesia exists. So Indonesia is actually ex of Dutch East Indies. Right. 1945, President Sukarno declared our independence and become the country's first president. 1966, he handed emergency powers to General Suharto, and then the new order regime began. And this regime is ruling for about 3 decades, from 1967 until 1998, when the resignation of President Suharto occurred and the Reformation Era happened until now. So, how many presidents do you think we have already? How many presidents, Iriska? Officially, we have 7 presidents, but in fact, we have 9 leaders. 9 leaders. So President Sukarno, and then Mr. Asaad, when we are in federalism, and then Mr. Safruddin Pranegara, General Suharto, President Habibie, President Gus Dur, President Megawati, President Yudhoyono, and finally, right now, still, President Joko Widodo. That is a brief picture of Indonesia. So far, any question about Indonesia? Yep.
Is Norway not the country which has the largest archipelago on its west side? I'm not sure about that because there are a lot of small islands of the Norwegian coast also.
Norway.
Yes, Norway.
Yeah, I'm not sure. My official source indicate that Indonesia is the largest archipelagic country in the world. But we can check it, double check. All right. Any other question? Anyone planning to visit Indonesia? Please, if you do have an intention to visit our campus, maybe take 1 semester or just 2 projects, please come and we can facilitate your intention. All right. Now let's move on to ASEAN. So, probably some of you have learned about ASEAN in the class, but here I would like to remind you that ASEAN, or Association of Southeast Asian Nations, was established in Bangkok on August 8, 1967 by 5 countries. They are Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand. And the declaration of ASEAN was signed by the 5 countries' representative. Number 1 is Mr. Adam Malik, who was at that time Minister of Foreign Affairs, and then he became the Vice President of General Suharto. And then also Tun Abdul Razak at that time is Deputy Prime Minister, and in fact he was the 2nd Prime Minister in Malaysian history, and he was also the father of Prime Minister Najib Razak, right? Ex Prime Minister. And then the 3rd one is Narcisco Ramos, Secretary of Foreign Affairs in the Philippines. Number 4 is Rajaratnam, Minister of Foreign Affairs in Singapore. And then the last one, Tanat Koman, the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Thailand, the Kingdom of Thailand. So what is the objective of ASEAN? If we look at the declaration of ASEAN, we can see that ASEAN has 7 aims, 7 goals. Number 1, we have to underline this. Number 1, the goal of ASEAN is to accelerate economic growth, social progress, and cultural development. Italics is by me, because this is very important. Economic growth, social progress, and cultural development in the region through joint endeavors in the spirit of equality and partnership in order to strengthen the foundation for a prosperous and peaceful community of Southeast Asian nations. You have to remember that when once, in the time of the establishment, these ASEAN countries are generally newly independent. The second objective is to promote regional peace and stability through abiding respect for justice and the rule of law in the relationship among countries of the region and adherent to the principle of the United Nations Charter. Third one is to promote active collaboration and mutual assistance on matters of common interest, again, in the economic, social, cultural, technical, scientific, and also administrative fields. Number 4, to provide assistance to each other in the form of training and research facilities in the educational, professional, technical, and administrative spheres. Number 5, this is kind of collaboration. To collaborate more effectively for the greater utilization of their agriculture and industries, because many ASEAN members are agricultural countries. Also, the expansion of their trade, including the study of the problems of international commodity trade, the improvement of their transportation and communication facilities, and also the raising of the living standard of their peoples. Number 6 is related to the center that is led by Dr. Kipken, is to promote Southeast Asian studies. So your center is actually implementing the objective of ASEAN. 7, to maintain close and beneficial cooperation with existing international and regional organizations with similar aims and purposes and explore all avenues for even closer cooperation among themselves. So those objectives are on the minds of the founding members of ASEAN, 5 members. But how many member countries right now? We have 10, right? 10 members. 1967, we only have 5 members. In Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand. 1984, exactly the year of Brunei Darussalam independence, they joined the ASEAN. Then 1995, Vietnam joined the ASEAN. 1997, Laos and Myanmar. And 1999 is Cambodia. And now, in front of the door, is Timor-Leste is waiting, I think. Right. So how these countries interact each other? They have the principles of interaction among them, what they call as the ASEAN fundamental principles. Number 1, mutual respect for the independent sovereignty, equality, territorial integrity, and national identity of all regions, all nations. Number 2, the right of every state to lead its national existence free from external interference, subversion, or coercion. The second principle is very important because, from this principle, people usually call this as ASEAN Way. Have you studied about ASEAN Way? ASEAN Way consists of two main principles. Number one is principle of non-interference. They mean Indonesia cannot intervene domestic affairs in Malaysia. Malaysia cannot intervene domestic affairs in Myanmar, and so on. The second important principle is that all decision in ASEAN is reached using consensus, not voting. They mean all of the member countries should agree on that kind of things that they want to discuss. Number three is non-interference in the internal affairs of one another. Number four is settlement of differences or dispute by peaceful manner. Number four is renunciation of the threat or use of force. And number six is effective cooperation among themselves. So, I want to underline that those six principles make ASEAN different from other regional organizations such as European Union. Any other student remember or have understanding what is the difference between ASEAN and European Union? Any people? Okay.
Could you say that ASEAN is the European Union is a supranational
Right.
union,
Mm-hmm.
whereas ASEAN is based more on, as you said, it's not based on a voting system, it's based on
Right.
consensus. So,
Yeah.
and in the European Union, they vote. So
That's
I
right.
think that's I find that to be extremely,
Mm-hmm.
I find the ASEAN way to be extremely beneficial and cooperative.
Right. Can you describe what is supranational organization?
Supranational, basically, the rules established by the union are overbinding on all member states, and the rules established by the union together
Right.
are for everyone. Whereas in ASEAN, you don't interfere in the internal affairs
Right.
of each other. So I
Yes.
think that's an important understanding of even sovereignty.
Yep. That's exactly what I want to listen. I mean, exactly right. So if you see here in my slide, number one difference between ASEAN and European Union. Yep. ASEAN is intergovernmental organization. That means all members of ASEAN actually different legal entity. They have their own sovereignty, and they don't give up any kind of sovereignty to this organization. On the other hand, European Union is a supranational organization. What does it mean? That means the members of European Union have to give up part of their sovereignty to the organization. Economic or currency, things like that. That leads us to the second difference. In ASEAN, there are no common currency. Indonesia has rupiah, right? Malaysia has ringgit. Singapore has dollar. I don't know Myanmar. What do you have, Papao? Huh? Chan. And then Thailand has baht, right? So there is no single currency in Southeast Asia. That means if I want to visit Malaysia, I have to bring my ringgit to buy something. If Malaysian people want to buy something in Indonesia, they have to use rupiah. In Euro, they have common currency. In European Union, that is Euro. This indicates that the members of European Union give up their sovereignty over currency to this organization. So we can see a stronger integration in the economy of the European Union members. And now I'm not sure if ASEAN members will agree to give up this kind of authority. So have a single currency, for example, ASEAN dollar. If that possible, ASEAN dollar, well, that will be good. Number three, of course, because of this kind of non-interference principle, there is no ASEAN parliament, right? Compared to European Union, they have a European Union parliament. Of course, we have the ASEAN Interparliamentary Assembly, but that just for communication, coordination, collaboration, things like that. They don't have any legal power to make legislation or anything like that. Number 4, ASEAN has a relatively small and weak secretariat, while European Union have very powerful secretariat called the European Commission, right? Number 5, in ASEAN, I already mentioned this, that all of the decisions should be reached using consensus, not voting. While in European Union, making decision can be taken using votes of the members. But, there is but. In 2003, we are moving toward a stronger association. By what? By agreement between ASEAN leaders to have or to realize what they call the ASEAN community in 2003. And this agreement was taken at the 9th ASEAN Summit in Bali. And you know, the role of Indonesian government is really crucial in this kind of thing. So, what they think about the ASEAN community is actually consists of 3 pillars. Number 1 is political security community. Number 2 is economic community. Number 3 is socio-cultural community. So from now on, we ASEAN people have one vision of ASEAN, still vision, right? At least they have a willingness to have a stronger integration between ASEAN countries. And these 3 pillars, each of these 3 pillars have the blueprints. So we also make the blueprint for every pillars. In political security, it mentioned that ASEAN want to be rules-based community of shared norms and values. So even though we are coming from different traditional languages or ethnicities, but we want to have a single community who have shared norms and values. We also want to be a cohesive, peaceful, stable, and resilient region with shared responsibility. And we also want to have a dynamic and outward-looking region. From the perspective of economy, ASEAN members want to achieve a highly integrated and cohesive economy. So maybe European Union inspire the ASEAN members. Number 2, they want to reach a competitive, innovative, and dynamic ASEAN. The last one, enhance connectivity and sectoral cooperation. In terms of socio-cultural, ASEAN want to be a committed, participative, and socially responsible community for the benefit of ASEAN peoples. And they want to be an inclusive community that promotes high quality of life, equitable access to opportunities for all, and promotes and protect human rights. So the component of human rights now is under very important consideration of ASEAN. And this idea of ASEAN community is supported by ASEAN Charter 2007 when we had the 13th ASEAN Summit. All ASEAN member countries signed the ASEAN Charter. So the ASEAN Charter make this kind of vision much stronger, right? So the ASEAN Charter consists of the introduction, 13 chapters, 55 articles that requires the application of all ASEAN values, all ASEAN principles, regulation, and objective as stated in various agreements, declaration, convention, treaties, and other basic ASEAN documents. So the Charter legally bind all member countries to implement all agreements that have been mutually agreed upon. It's no longer voluntary, but compulsory, right? And this chapter came into force since December 15, 2008, and it is a very important step for ASEAN to move from loose association into a legal entity that is based on clear rules. So this is actually a very big cornerstone for ASEAN. And now, let's discuss the role of Indonesia as a big brother in ASEAN, right? But before we discuss about this, I have to underline that there is no formal leadership in ASEAN. Why? Because all member countries are equal in ASEAN. So even though Indonesia have a largest population, that doesn't mean that Indonesia should be the leader of ASEAN. So this is something we have to underline. However, traditionally, Indonesia has played a leadership role, right? That's Dr. Kip can call the rule of Big Brother, okay? So it has been also considered by many experts, if you read several journals on ASEAN, many of them consider Indonesia as the facto leader of ASEAN because of its size and geostrategic position. What kind of position that Indonesia has? Number one, Indonesia's population is around 260 million people, make up of 37.6% of ASEAN's total population. It's really a big number in ASEAN. Number two, Indonesia contribute around 36% of the total combined ASEAN GDP, whereas the nearest three member countries individually contribute no more than 15%. So when the other member only no more than 15%, Indonesia's contribution is about 36%. Number three, the country's 17,000 islands account for 42.5% of ASEAN's land mass. This is a big proportion in ASEAN. And it is the only G20 member from Southeast Asia and often unofficially speaks for the region. This unique position make Indonesia as kind of big brother in ASEAN. I say big brother, quote unquote, because there is no official document saying that Indonesia is actually a big brother in ASEAN. Right. So what kind of leadership role have Indonesia played in ASEAN? I can divide into three. Is the past time, during 1967 to 2014, and then present time from 2014 until 2019, and future time that is after 2019. Let's see. If we talk about past leadership role, then we have to look at three different times, different eras. That is Suharto Era, number one. Second one is Habibie, Abdurrahman Wahid, and Megawati Era. I would like to say this is a transition era to democracy, right? Transition era to democracy. The third one is the era of Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono. I would like to say this is stronger democracy era. Let's see these three eras one by one. Number one is Suharto Era, during 1967 to 1998. During this era, Indonesia had been the driving force for the development of the ASEAN's norms and institutions and played a significant leadership role. What are the rules? I can show you that the first principle formed with Indonesia as the leading force was the creation of ZOPFAN. What is ZOPFAN? The Zone for Peace, Freedom, and Neutrality. That was signed on November 27, 1971, which strengthened the commitment of ASEAN member countries to keep security and political stability of the region. That's a very important step led by Indonesia. The second one is the creation of the fundamental principle of ASEAN, which can be seen in the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation in 1976. We have already discussed about this principle, the principle of non-interference and the principle of reaching decision using consensus among all of the country members. Number three, Indonesia has become an effective mediator during the Cambodian conflict between 1979 and 1991. All of those things is an example of the role of Indonesia in ASEAN under the administration of President Suharto. what happened during the transition era? Well, I have to say that during this era, Indonesia played a very passive role, not active role, in leading ASEAN, or I say to be a driving force in ASEAN. Why? Because we were very busy with our economic and political situation. You know, in 1997, economic crisis hit Southeast Asia, and that's affect Indonesia not only economically but also politically. General Suharto stepped down from the power. So President Habibie, President Wahid, and also President Megawati is really busy with their domestic affairs, and they don't have, I think, very much time to concern on foreign affairs, especially on ASEAN. Thankfully, when the democracy is stable during Yudhoyono era, Indonesia enacts various key foreign policies that brought them back to their strategic position in ASEAN. We can see, for example, Yudhoyono's administration has a geographic proximity policy that define ASEAN as its inner circle priority. So our focus is moved from domestic also to the regions, that the ASEAN. And he also had million friends, zero enemies policy, indicating that Indonesia consider their friend as very important for the development of their countries. And this is very important. ASEAN is considered as the cornerstone of Indonesians' foreign policy. So this returned ASEAN as one of the foreign policy priorities in Indonesia. Not only this kind of policy, Indonesia also initiate institutional reforms of ASEAN. You remember that the ASEAN community and also ASEAN Charter is signed during the Yudhoyono era, especially ASEAN Charter 2007, and also they acting as a mediator during the conflict over the Temple of Prayer Vihar between Cambodia and Thailand. How about now, during Jokowi 2014-2019? Unfortunately, I have to say, many observers, many experts argue that Joko Widodo seemed to be less interested in ASEAN. And its governments move ASEAN from the cornerstone to only a cornerstone of Indonesian foreign policy. Why? Yes, because I think Jokowi is more interested in domestic issues such as building infrastructures and any other kind policies that can support him get re-elected in the next presidential election. So I write here, he is more concerned on issues that can provide tangible political benefits, such as investment and public infrastructure. And I have to say that in this kind of field, Jokowi is very success in building investment and public infrastructures. On South China Sea dispute, this is the expertise of Dr. Kipken. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Kipken. So Jokowi has shifted Indonesia's position from taking a leadership role in the regional dispute to the assertion of sovereignty of the coast of Natuna Island. So we often say that we are not part of the problem. Indonesia are not part of the problem of South China Sea, but at the same time, the government insists that Natuna Sea is firm jurisdiction of Indonesia. Nobody can intervene this jurisdiction. But thank God, surprisingly, at the 13th ASEAN Summit in Manila 2017, Jokowi suggested that ASEAN must always be a hub for regional diplomacy. So after 2 or 3 years, kind of neglecting ASEAN. During the final years, Jokowi surprised many people that he brought ASEAN into one of his priority. And also he expressed Indonesian support for solution to the Rohingya crisis. Do you know why? Do you know why Jokowi expressed his support to the Rohingya crisis? Do you know why? Because Rohingya people, the majority of them are Muslim. Is it right, Dr. Kipken? So, you're partly right. Yeah, why? Because in the eye of the Indonesian public, Rohingya is Muslim. So if something happened to Rohingya, that means something happened to the religion. So if president provide an attention to that crisis, then the president will get political benefit before the presidential election, right? So that's why he brought the Rohingya crisis into public attention. How about the future, right? You know, in the last April's general election, President Jokowi is re-elected in the president's election. I would argue that Indonesia's policy on ASEAN would be no much different under the second Jokowi administration. He was re-elected and he will be the president for the next 5 years. But I think there is possibility of improvement. Why? Number one, the president is no longer worried about running for the next presidential election. So he should be able to prioritize not only domestic programs, but also foreign policy as well. They mean ASEAN. Second one, this kind of attention solely depend on the support of the official from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. If the officials of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, if they give enough support, materials for the president, then I think the president will give also priority for ASEAN. I think that's all what I can deliver, Dr. Kipken. Again, if you have any question or confirmation or anything, I would like to discuss about it. Thanks a lot.
Right. Thank you so much. We are right on time. It's 12 noon. That's what is exactly in the written the schedule. So just to remind everyone that we are streaming live. So especially for people, our friends, those who are in Indonesia, so we would like them to see, watch what's going on. That's why we are streaming live. And this would be available on YouTube right after this event. So you can watch again if you, in case you miss or you would like to revisit some of the discussions. And among others, I just would like to recognize my colleague, Professor Tripati here from JSI School of International Affairs. He's the only faculty colleague who is attending this event from our department. Thanks for coming. And I think it was very comprehensive, the way how you cover the topic, because you start with the history and then the present and your analysis about the future. So it covers a wide range of issues. In fact, my research assistants here, Sivangi, Mahan, and Sanjana, and also Ankit, most of them have studied in my Southeast Asian class. So I think for them it's a kind of renewing their knowledge again on Southeast Asia and ASEAN. So now we are going to open the floor, but before I open the floor for the audience, I would like to start with one question myself. So I keep telling Danny, because he's a friend, but I should say I have to be a little bit formal, Dr. Mutada. If I may ask, based on your presentation, so do you think that in the future, let's say for about, you are more optimistic that Indonesia may be taking a more important role because during the 5 years of the present president, because he was more focused on domestic issues in the first term, but now he is not going to run for another term. So you think that he's going to focus more on let's say, ASEAN and foreign policy issues. And you said that it become from the cornerstone to a cornerstone, the ASEAN for some time, but again in 2017, if I remember correctly, you said that ASEAN has to be a place for diplomacy. It has to play a more important role in diplomacy. So how far do you think Indonesia can lead ASEAN toward more integration? So if you look at now, because you compare between European Union versus ASEAN, and I mean, of course, conceptually they are two different organizations. But again, the plan is that one of the original goals of ASEAN is to bring all countries together. And of course, you mentioned that the next country which will be part of ASEAN is Timor-Leste or East Timor. And this is just a matter of time. We don't know when that's going to happen, but hopefully it's going to happen soon. So where do you think the role of Indonesia in terms of integrating them more closely, politically speaking, and as well as when it comes to security matters? For example, now we have insurgency movement, or let's say the rise of ISIS in the region, and also because of the Rohingya crisis, there is a speculation that this may lead to the rise of extremism and terrorism in the region. So what do you think the role of Indonesia would be in that case? Because you said that Indonesia being the largest Muslim country, they are also sympathetic about the Rohingya people as a community. But also at the same time, they also have to be quite balanced. Otherwise, things are not functioning the way it should be in many other regions, many parts of the world. They have to be in consensus manner, a peaceful resolution of problems. And we do not see that's happening so far. So where do you see the role or the situation of Indonesia in that regard, especially when it comes to security matters of the region? Let's collect a few questions, and then, so that's my first question. I would like to open the floor, if anybody would like to ask. Yeah, please. Please introduce yourself briefly, okay?
Hello, sir. From JSIA. So I actually have two questions. The first question is, when we talk about ASEAN, another regional organization that comes to mind is SARC. Both are also called sister organizations as some of the academicians.
What's the organization?
SARC.
South, it's a organization in South Asia.
Okay.
South Asian Regional Cooperation.
So, when both of them have incorporated at the same time, have the same structure, but where ASEAN has been very successful, SARC has not been that successful. So how can we learn from ASEAN to make SARC better, and how ASEAN and SARC have a greater integration, economic or cultural integration, which many individual governments in SARC are actually trying to do. For example, India is trying to incorporate Project Mosam with ASEAN countries. So what suggestions you can give where SARC can learn from ASEAN? And my second question is, in your presentation you talked about the political security implementation of ASEAN. In doing so, you suggested there should be a common rules and regulations for all the ASEAN member countries.
Census?
Yeah. So there will be similar rules and regulations. There will be regulatory bodies where all the ASEAN countries will interact with each other. But while implementing that in future, don't you think ASEAN members countries will somehow become a tad bit interventionist and somehow will have to take inferences from how EU has also become a little bit supranational?
You mean how ASEAN maintain the principle of ASEAN way
Yeah.
in the interaction of ASEAN members?
Okay, I think then you can go ahead and answer these questions, and we'll go to the next one.
Right.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Kipken and Mr. Sabrisachi. I'm sorry if I didn't say it correctly. So, number one, how optimistic I am with the future Indonesian policy regarding ASEAN. To be honest, I'm quite optimistic about the rule of Indonesia in ASEAN under the second Jokowi administration. Why? Because I have two arguments. Number one, President Jokowi does not have any more incentive to focus only on domestic affairs, domestic issues. I know he is not an internationalist. He is not regionalist as President Yudhoyono. President Yudhoyono has global vision, stronger than President Jokowi. But based on his expression on the importance of ASEAN as a hub in regional diplomacy, I guess that the officials from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is starting to give him a good feedback about ASEAN. So if officials from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs keep giving him advices and also supplementing with good argument or documents about the importance of the rule of Indonesia and ASEAN, then Indonesia will come back to be one of the leading actors in the development of ASEAN. But let's see, because personally, the issue of ASEAN is not part of the presidential election debate. We have a public debate on TVs, radios, things like that. Either Jokowi or Prabowo Subianto, he's another president's candidate, they never mention in their argument or in their program something about ASEAN. So I think we still have time to make the new president have more focus on ASEAN. Indonesia is very important, very strategic. It has a very strategic position. Big size in populations, very strategic, geostrategic position. So I think we need to give him more advice, supplement him with the good materials about the importance of Indonesia to lead programs about ASEAN. So honestly, I would like to answer, I'm optimistic, but that solely depends on the support of the officials from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I have to say frankly that I cannot answer your first question. Maybe Dr. Kipken can answer your question. My analysis on the ASEAN success is because there is a de facto leader in ASEAN who is willingly to play an important role in integrating the ASEAN members, number one. The second one, the principle of ASEAN way, that is the principle of non-interference and the principle of reaching decision using consensus, can make the ASEAN members feel equal. So they are feeling, exactly, we are as important as you are, and we have to develop. They have different norms, different. We have shared norms. They have shared values, and they have the same common interests. They mean how to keep the regions stable politically and economically. So that is, I think, my short answer. Honestly speaking, I do apologize for not having a good answer for you. Maybe you want to give an answer?
What was the first question?
So, SAARC and ASEAN,
Oh.
how can SAARC learn from ASEAN?
Okay. I think my friend Danny has talked about a little bit, but let me supplement what he just said. There are a few things. It's not just one or 2 points that has to be done, but there are several other things that we can learn and we can do to make better so how SAARC should learn from ASEAN. Number one, let's talk about making all parties equal partners. So for example, if you look at ASEAN, I think Danny has just pointed out, Indonesia has contributed about 36%, which is much larger than any other countries. in the region, in the entire Southeast Asia. But at the same time, Indonesia does not consider herself as the leader in the sense that not trying to dominate the entire region. Of course, she knows that she is very important and integral to the success of ASEAN, but at the same time, Indonesia does not act like she is the superpower, the leader of the region. And other countries also see that way. But what happens in SAARC, to my understanding, is that there are several others, but one major reason is that other countries do not see them as equal partners in a SAARC. And they see India as more like acting like a hegemon in the region. If you look at it, for example, if you go to Nepal or Bhutan and others, if you talk to the smaller nations, they think that we are just one and we are not equal partner. And we cannot, of course, their argument is also right, saying that India has a huge population and also contribute more in terms of economy and infrastructure and others. But again, and that doesn't give them the chance to be equal partners. I mean, for them, conceptually, even though they may want to be equal partner, and they feel a little bit isolated, and they don't feel that they are part of the inclusive process. And of course, the second major issue is about the ever going on, the conflict between Pakistan and India, across the border, and these terrorist activities and others. If you look at ASEAN, there is no such issue between two countries. For example, let's say Indonesia and Singapore, or Indonesia and Malaysia, Indonesia and Thailand. Of course, there have been some issues between Cambodia and Thailand and others. But again, those things were not as big and not as lingering as what has been between India and Pakistan on the cross-border terrorism, or even in the Jammu and Kashmir issue. So I think until unless India and Pakistan, which are the two biggest partners in SAARC, resolve their bilateral issues or set aside their bilateral issues, so it would not make SAARC a useful organization, because that's the main reason why SAARC has not been very successful, because they cannot meet. They don't want to sit together on the same table and talk about economic development, infrastructure development, social sectors and others, when there is a cross-border terrorism accusing each other. So I think it's very difficult in that matter. But again, if once these bilateral issues are resolved between these two countries, I'm hoping that several others can be also subsequently lessened, or if not resolved. And maybe one other issue might be that, so they focus on, let's say, issues such as economic integration and less focus on security matters, because these are the soft areas where people might be willing to come together and cooperate. And when it comes to like sovereignty issues or terrorism or security matters, countries are at odds with each other, especially Pakistan and India. So you do not find those things happening between countries in Southeast Asia, despite their differences. Of course, if you look at the entire Southeast Asia, all of them have different forms of government. You'll find many hybrid democracies or hybrid regimes there. And you find the communist nation, you find democracy, you find a hybrid democracy, or you find authoritarianism, name it. You find all forms of government. But they set aside their differences and try to find the areas where they can cooperate each other. If South Asian countries also do somehow copy that idea and set aside areas where they have a hard time or they cannot, let's say, compromise, and focus on areas where they can start working together. I think this is where maybe SAARC can learn from ASEAN. Of course, there are other issues, but I'm just talking about three important issues that can be mentioned. So, and now we would like to open the second round. So you can ask anybody, not just the speaker, but you can ask the dean and others also. I would like to open the floor for the second round of questions.
Hello, Professor. I have a question. With the increasing Chinese aggressive behavior in the South China Sea issue, there are a lot of Indian scholars who actively advocate Vietnam to acquire nuclear weapon. So in that scenario, what position would Indonesia take, or what would be ASEAN's position?
So as you mentioned in your presentation, the principle of non-interference is very important for ASEAN. So in terms of the ongoing human rights violations in Myanmar, what would be the response of other countries in the region? And in your opinion, would the principle ever be sidelined in interfering with Myanmar in that case?
My question is kind of related to what my colleague asked over here. I'm reading law now, so my question is law-oriented, and it's linked to the South China Sea dispute and what I have researched upon and looked up online and read is that if there is a matter which goes, say, to the International Court of Justice, and if there, sorry? Is there if there's a dispute which goes to the International Court of Justice or to the PSC for some sort of a negotiation between the parties, and since ASEAN countries are economically and geographically linked, will there be some sort of a ramification based on the judgment that is given by an international court? Will it affect their relations? And I think this is where China also plays an important part. Although it is not a member of ASEAN, it influences the thinking and ideologies of all ASEAN countries. That is something that my research has also suggested while I was writing for Professor Kipkin. And so in that sense, could one infer that it is China who rather plays the role of a big brother and not Indonesia? So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for a very beautiful question. It's hardly. All right. About the influence of China on the Southeast Asian region, I have to say that the history of ASEAN cannot be spirited from the wariness of ASEAN leaders of the influence of communism from the north, China, right? So that's why, before 1965, when Indonesia was under the president of Sukarno, we had a very close relationship between Indonesia and China. So communist influence is very strong. So when Sukarno stepped down and Suharto came into power, he was trying to differentiate his policy from the policy of Sukarno, and communism became the common enemy in Indonesia. So government is trying to, let's say, persuade people or give opinion that communism is bad. So the establishment of ASEAN at that time actually is trying to protect the ASEAN countries from the influence of the West and the influence of the East, I mean communism. That's why in 1976 they regulate several principles that now become the ASEAN way. The principle of non-interference from the ASEAN members or from the outside Southeast Asian countries. And now, how about the influence of China? Well, I would like to give a picture about what is the Indonesian public's feel about the influence of China. In Indonesia, actually, for some people, let's say large proportion, they worry about the Chinese influence in Indonesia, the migrants, workers, and then investments, things like that. And fortunately or unfortunately, the President Jokowi is often seen, frequently seen by this part of the people to have a tendency over China. So when you ask me about how about the ASEAN, how does ASEAN respond to the Chinese influence? Well, I cannot give you a very exact answer. What is this response? Because if Indonesia have this kind of response to the Chinese government, Chinese investment, then how can we expect from ASEAN? In fact, Indonesia so far become the leader, the quote unquote in ASEAN. So let's see how can ASEAN respond to this kind of, especially if you look at the tension over China Sea. So I think you can give more answer about that. What is the position of ASEAN in response to this conflict? Because those tensions involving several ASEAN countries, right? What is that? Thailand, the Philippines, right? The Philippines and also Vietnam, and what else? Brunei Darussalam and Malaysia too, right? And Indonesia, if I already mentioned that, we always say we are not part of the problem. But under Jokowi administration, he frequently showed to the public that Natuna Island is the sovereignty of Indonesia, right? Natuna Island is very close to the South China Sea. Human rights issues, right? Human rights issues. Yeah, frankly speaking, the principle of non-interference is becoming obstacle in resolving the issue of human rights in Myanmar. So, as one of the ASEAN members, Myanmar has a very strong standpoint to keep their domestic affairs far from the intervention of other ASEAN members, including ASEAN as an association. Because if any ASEAN members come to intervene or to resolve the issue of human rights in Myanmar, then they will break the law. They will break the principles of non-interference. But as I have already shown you, in the vision of ASEAN community, human rights is one of the important factors that have to be obeyed by all us ASEAN members. So if we follow this kind of vision, then there is no exception. Laos, Myanmar, Indonesia, Singapore, they have to respect human rights. So if something happens in every country members regarding the human rights, then ASEAN as an association, not Indonesia as a single country or Malaysia as a single country, ASEAN association, I think should have opportunity to show that they can play roles in resolving the problem of human rights in Myanmar. That's my answer, Kip Ken.
All right, so we'll have last round in case if we have any very important questions to ask, and this will be a last round, and let me open the floor again. You want to go?
Sir, recently ASEAN has adopted ASEAN Outlook on Indo-Pacific. So, sir, will ASEAN Outlook on Indo-Pacific, like on the 34th summit. So, sir, will this be able to provide a vision to the region in solving the strategic challenges which the region is facing? Also, what role will Indonesia play in it?
So the vision of ASEAN community actually is an effort try to integrate all of the countries in Southeast ASEAN becoming one single entity, right? Even though we have different backgrounds, cultural, ethnicities, languages, and so on. But ASEAN is aware that we are living in the global world. I mean, the global environment, so that we cannot neglect our neighbors. That's why we have ASEAN Plus. Plus what? Plus Australia, plus New Zealand, things like that. So I think ASEAN community can be widened or broadened into neighboring countries using the vision ASEAN community plus the neighbors. But again, because ASEAN is not actually has a very strong institution, structural institution, so we have to wait what happens in the future. And again, the role of Indonesia as one of the members who have a big population is very important. So let's see what the Jokowi administration will do regarding the ASEAN policy. I think that's all, Dr. Kipken. Thank you very much for your attention.
All right, thank you very much, Danny. So I think we have now come to the closing part of the session. But just would like to recap a couple of issues, especially the role of China. And Ankit has rightly mentioned how China has become very important in the region. Definitely, if you look at the entire Southeast Asia, there is no nation in Southeast Asia which is not somehow dependent on China. But that doesn't mean that China is taking over Southeast Asia. In fact, if you look at the geopolitics, America is there, Australia is there, the Indo-Pacific, the quadrilateral that is coming up. In fact, it was recently upgraded to the for minister level. So, despite the fact that China has given a huge amount of money to these individual Southeast Asian countries, that doesn't mean that all Southeast Asian countries are, let's say, absolutely happy and fine with Chinese dominance or China's dominance in the region. If you look at the case of South China Sea dispute, for example, they have in 2002 they signed what they call DOC, and now in 2017 there was a COC, again Code of Conduct, and the discussion is going on. What happens is that Southeast Asian countries do realize that they do not have the military power, the economic power, the resources to defeat China in that way, in the hard terms, or in terms of hard power. Therefore, for them, it is the best to negotiate with China. And in fact, China also wants that way to happen. They do not want any major conflict to go on in the South China Sea, in the region. But having said that, we should not forget how China is important to Southeast Asia, economically speaking, and in terms of infrastructure as well, especially if you look at Cambodia and Laos, which are the smallest two countries in Southeast Asia. Some scholars argue that they could also eventually become the province of China. I don't want to go that far, but they are very much dependent on China's support economically and for their own survival. So there is no doubt that China's role has been increased, and it's going to increase in the future. But again, at the same time, we also have to remind that ASEAN is there. They do not, in principle, they are against communism. They do not like communism. Of course, there's a member of Vietnam. Since they do not focus on this communist principle as such, they are working together as a group. And then we will see more international players coming in, like America and India. Of course, there's a lot of expectations from our Southeast Asian countries for India to play a greater role, but India also has its own limitations, its own problem in the backyard, and also its own bilateral problems with China. So this is something that is very interesting. And as I said, when my book comes up, many of these things will be discussed in that book. And coming to the point of the Rohingya crisis, in fact, ASEAN recently has taken some more active role in Myanmar. Of course, this happened only after the invitation coming from Myanmar. So they could not just go in, even though they have ASEAN Charter on Human Rights, which is a binding. legally binding among member countries. But if one member says, no, this is our internal affairs, they could not go in, even though they have a charter on that. So in recent years, we see that Myanmar has been, after strong international pressure, so they are willing to invite ASEAN to take a little bit more role on the issue of human rights, including Rohingya crisis. And that's what's happening. And we don't know exactly where it's going headed, but hopefully we will see more role from ASEAN on human rights, and as well as in other issues, including economy and also infrastructure development in the region. So having said that, we would like to wind up here, and now, before we end, is in the law school doing his LLB, and Ankit Malhotra to give a vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir. I'm truly grateful to be able to deliver this address. I'd like to offer a warm, hearty thank you to you who've come all the way from Indonesia on a Friday morning. And as we get into a holiday break, thank you for coming here and offering an exceptionally glorious and informative session. It's truly been absolutely fantastic. As ma'am charted out, the role of university building and institution building, I think that is something I have experienced in Jindal University over the past 4 years, and I'm sure that this memorandum of understanding between two universities will be exceptionally useful, especially for students like myself who have immersed ourselves in not only academic work but also the other nuanced features of international relations and law, of course. As I understand, both of you practice and teach law, which I find exceptionally useful for myself and for my colleagues over here. It has been an absolutely riveting journey, and I have several people to thank for it. I'm delighted to be able to do that. First of all, to Professor Kipgin, who has always been open to build on ideas and on thoughts. His unmatched intelligence is one of the reasons I have continued my expert grasping of knowledge and working with him under his center and with him on academic pieces. Moving on to our wonderful speakers, as I've said, thank you so much for coming here. The expert Jindal staff who's always been ready and always ready to help and are live streaming this event. And most importantly, to my colleagues of the Center for Southeast Asian Studies. I mean, without whom this event would not have been possible. And as my experience has told me, I should keep this very short and not stand between lunch. So with that short note, I just have one small point. I think what sir and ma'am have been able to do is that they've tried to open different avenues and different opportunities for young and enthusiastic students like ourselves. And they've tried to give us an understanding and opening of what ASEAN is and what ASEAN holds for us in the future. Of course, all this is dependent on what the history has taught us, and that has very adroitly been charted out by sir. With those words, I hope you go well, and I hope you fare well. Thank you once again for coming. Thank you.
All right, I also, on behalf of the Center for Southeast Asian Studies, I would like to say thank you very much, especially our friends from Indonesia. And we hope this is not just the beginning of a future expansive collaboration. And hopefully some of us will come and visit your campus, and your students and some of the faculty members from university also may come to us in the future. And let's keep our relationship stronger and active, and we wish you all the best and a safe trip back to Indonesia. And now the session is officially over, and we'll go for lunch. Thank you.